Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Leonie Sherwin, and I am a program manager with the Professional Educator Standards Board, or PGP. We're very excited that you are here today and excited to tell you about this grant. You can see the link to the slides available here, and after this meeting, we will be sending out an email to you with the link to the slides and the link to the application as well. Before we begin, I'd like to ask my colleagues from PGP to go ahead and introduce themselves as well. Maren, would you like to introduce yourself?
So my name is Maren Johnson. I'm Associate Director for Preparation and Credentialing with the Professional Educator Standards Board. Megan.
Thanks, Maren. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Megan Moore, and I'm on the Preparation and Credentialing team here at PGP.
Hey, thank you. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Megan, if you don't mind moving to the next slide, please. Thank you. So again, we're very glad you've joined us. We're very excited about these grants. I would like to go over just a couple of webinar protocols very quickly. One is that all participants are muted, and we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions. So as you have questions as we're going through the webinar, please be sure to put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat box, and then we will take time to go through all those questions at the end of the webinar. And it looks like Maren did just put the link to the slides in the chat box if you would like to access that as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we would like to begin our time together today with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that the indigenous people who have been historically moved from their homelands and whose territories are now where our institutions reside and operate today. PGP's office is located in Olympia, which historically belonged to members of the Squaxin Island tribe. Please take a moment to just mentally locate your current location on this map and consider that although we are all in different locations, many of us reside on the historical indigenous lands of the many different tribes in Washington state. PGP's work involves innovative projects such as this grant, which improve and support educator quality and workforce diversity so that students from underserved populations receive a quality education. Next slide, please. Thank you. And we also would like to take a moment of silence to acknowledge the history of this nation, one that is fraught with contradictions. For too long, this country has elevated a story of democracy and freedom while minimizing the impact of violence and oppression on marginalized communities, communities on whose backs this nation was built. Today, members of our Black community and other communities of color continue to experience racism through police brutality, mass incarceration, inequitable education and health services, deportation, and other forms of subjugation. We at PGP aim to disrupt the legacy of systemic racism by centering racial equity and justice in our work. This is how we stand with our communities of color. So before we begin today, we would like to offer a moment of silence to consider these words and how you might join us in this work. Thank you. And Megan, if you could move to the next slide, thank you. All right, so I'd like to go over the goals briefly for this webinar. Today, we'd like to provide you an overview of PGP, which is Professional Educator Standards Board, some guiding principles of the grant, priorities for grant selection, and the focus areas of the grant. We'd also like to provide you with some grant details and respond to any questions that you have. Finally, we want to ensure that you understand the next steps and you have our contact information if further questions arise. Thank you. And Maren, if you could share a little bit about PGP.
Sure. So the Professional Educator Standards Board has been around since 2000. We have a board of educator practitioners, so the majority of our board members are teachers, administrators, ESAs, people who are actually practicing in the field, and they are the ones who set the policy for educator preparation and credentialing. We also offer a number of different grant programs and other types of programs. Our overall goals aim at workforce development, diversifying the educator workforce, and ensuring a quality educator workforce. In addition, we are one agency, but we have two separate boards. We also have a paraeducator board. The paraeducator board is relatively new. It's been around since 2017. The paraeducator board is also composed primarily of practicing educators, and the paraeducator board establishes requirements and policies for our paraeducator professional development certificates and offers opportunities for paraeducators to continue their growth in their career. Next slide, please. Our work at PESB goes around the educator career continuum. We start off early with access and identify. For example, we have programs such as Recruiting Washington Teachers that supports high school students who are considering becoming educators in their local area. We do approval and review of educator preparation programs and set standards for educators. Placement, we do assignment policy. Who can teach what? What certificate is required for what particular type of role? We look at retention. Retention is actually one of the focus areas of this grant. Professional learning can be a strong strategy for retention. We also look at criteria and requirements for growth and transition for an educator throughout their career. Perhaps they're moving from a residency certificate to a professional certificate, or perhaps a teacher is considering pursuing a career as an administrator. So opportunities for growth and transition. Right now, our board is looking at their 5-year strategic plan. We're reviewing our goals. You can find out more and respond to a survey. If you'd like to provide input on our strategic plan, it's available at that link. We're collecting information through August. Turn it back over to Leonie.
Thank you, Maren. So as I mentioned before, we are very excited to offer these grants. We have $15,000 grants available to support educator retention through learning communities using professional growth plans, or PGPs. As Maren mentioned, professional learning can be a very strong piece of retention. Multiple organizations have noted a relationship between professional learning, teacher leadership, and retention. We have a couple of sites here. The Education Commission of the States noted that educators who have opportunities to share their expertise experience greater job satisfaction and are more likely to stay in the profession. And the Center for Teaching Quality found that opportunities for teacher leadership are critically important to recruiting and retaining the most effective and accomplished teachers. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So retention is the framework of the grant. The selection committee will be looking at grant applications, they will have these priorities in mind. So there are 3 priorities. So priority will be given to applicants who support learning communities of educators from underrepresented groups, or communities that equip educators to provide trauma-sensitive support to students from marginalized communities. And they'll also give priority to communities that include paraeducator in their learning communities. And you'll see there is a link there for trauma-sensitive support so that you can go and find out more about that. And also just a note on including paraeducators. Paraeducators are newly allowed now to use PGPs. They have not used them in the past except for last year for their professional learning. And so supporting educators will help them in this new learning as well. So just to give you an overview of the grant, as I mentioned, grantees will organize learning communities using competency-based educator learning, which is specifically PGPs. Each grantee must support at least 20 educators completing PGPs. So you could have 20 in one large learning community, or you could have several smaller learning communities, but you must have a minimum of 20 educators that you support. Grantees will then choose to focus the learning community work and PGPs in one of 2 areas, social emotional learning is one focus area of the grant. The other focus area is providing instruction in virtual environments. So Washington State school districts, tribal compact schools, ESDs, approved clock hour providers, and Washington Higher Education Institutes can apply for this grant. If you are an individual or know individuals who are interested in participating in the grant, then they should talk to one of these providers and see if the providers will be offered. Grant applications are due Wednesday, August 19th, and there is a link here to view the grant information packet, which has all of the details in the grant. So I would encourage you to read through that packet before you do apply. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so while the overarching framework of the grant is retention, and we have these priority areas and these focus areas, the structure of the learning communities are locally designed by the grantees to meet their local needs. However, within that local design, all grant applicants are required to provide learning communities to support educator growth through PGPs, required to elevate teacher and practitioner leadership by choosing PLC facilitators or grant coordinators who are current educators. They also are required to support culturally sustaining practices in teaching and learning. Next slide, please. All grantees will also be required to provide support to educators in terms of time and or compensation. So that could look like paying for release time and for a substitute for them if needed, or offering compensation in the way of stipends to the educators. We had some, or providing resources to educators or things like that. Also, grantees are required to integrate this structure of the learning community on another initiative or build within another initiative or structure within your organization. And finally, all grantees are required to take into account educators' prior knowledge and experience while designing and implementing your local grant structure. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right, so as I see a couple questions already, so as questions are coming up, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box and we will answer those at the end of the webinar. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about PGPs and the focus areas of the grant. Next slide, please. And Marin is going to tell you about PGPs.
Sure. So we just wanted to provide some basic information. Now we know that all of you have a variety of backgrounds with professional growth plans, so please know this is just an introduction. Your role as a grant recipient would be to support educators in completing these PGPs. So this is your introduction right now, and we would be providing grant recipients with much larger, much more comprehensive information. So just an introduction. So professional growth plans are a way for educators to obtain 25 clock hours at no additional cost to the educator. The professional growth plan involves a needs assessment and goal selection. The educator then puts together a professional growth action plan. The educator collects evidence and then reflects on their work. Only one PGP may be completed each year between July 1st and June 30th. Completion of a PGP includes a review by another Washington State certified educator. As a grantee, you would support and facilitate educators in completing PGPs in a professional learning community. These educators, all certificated educators, will be able to review one another's PGP. We have a PGP template form. You can see a picture of it right there. Next slide. So what do people actually do? What are some of the mechanics behind a PGP? Educators complete the PGP template, and you saw that on the last slide, and we provided links on our website. Then the educators attach evidence from their focused evaluation, PLC, or project. For example, if you were supporting educators in a PLC around social emotional learning, perhaps there was a common goal in social emotional learning, educators would attach evidence, student work, perhaps notes from a PLC, other types of evidence. Another certificate, a PGP can be reviewed by any other certificated educator in Washington State. The educator records their PGP in 2 different places. The educator records their PGP in OSPI e-certification for clock hours and certificate renewal. And if the educator wishes for their PGP to be considered to be eligible for possible salary advancement, the educator turns in, there's a separate verification form, the educator turns in their verification form to their district according to their school district procedures. In terms of recording the PGP and e-certification, it's quite simple. You see that panel there? Notice at the top it says step 1 of 1. That's how easy it is. And we'll be providing further support on this as the grant continues. Next slide, please. PGPs are aligned to certificate standards. If an educator was completing the PGP with a virtual learning goal, so they want to improve their professional skills in supporting virtual learning, they would still need to align that PGP to the certification standards. You can see the certification standards for each role. We have some priority and scoring of the grant applications are given. For example, Leonie will be telling you a little more about this in a second. For example, the paraeducators have their certificate standards here. You can see the certificate standards for all of the roles that we have right here. Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Maren. So as Mara mentioned, these are actually the focus areas here that we are going to be, or that participants can choose from. I'm sorry, grantees can choose from. So when you complete your application, you will be asked to choose one of 2 focus goals. The first focus goal is social emotional learning, or SEL. And basically, what that SEL is an intentional approach to building student assets and emphasizing development of the whole child. Washington State has developed a SEL framework and guiding principles, which you see here. Basically, SEL implementation starts with capacity building, and that refers to capacity building of both adults and students. So that capacity for social and emotional learning. SEL also requires collaboration between families, educators, community partners, and young people in its design and implementation. And then finally, SEL is shaped by a commitment to equity, cultural responsiveness, universal design, and trauma-informed practices. Next slide. So as you're thinking about your focus area, those are very broad focus areas, you could certainly narrow down your focus area to specific aspects of SEL. You could focus your group on adult capacity building, so building the capacity of the educators in the group. You could focus it on family engagement and empowerment, or cultural responsive teaching, or SEL in the para-educator standards of practice, or any other area that would fall underneath this broad umbrella of social emotional learning. For this particular focus area, there are also Washington State SEL standards. So participants, when they're completing their PGPs, must also align them to these Washington State SEL standards. So in this focus area, you would see that participants will need to align their PGPs not only to the role standards that Maren just showed you a moment ago, but also to the Washington State SEL standards. Also, here are a couple resources for you. Grantees are encouraged to use the OSPI SEL modules as learning activities in supporting your participants in completing PGPs. And also, OSPI has a SEL webpage that is linked here that has just a lot of several helpful resources that you can use, not only when you're designing your structure, but also when you're working with participants. Thank you. Next page. And so the second large focus area is providing instruction in virtual environments. Again, this is a very broad area, so you could narrow this down to family engagement while you're providing instruction in virtual environments, alternative learning experiences, student or faculty technology support, or any other area that would fall again under this broad umbrella of instruction in virtual environments. We also have some resources here for you, the Washington State Educational Technology K-12 Learning Standards, and then also the Educational Technology Standards. So again, as you're designing your application and grant, you could go back and refer to some of these standards and also use them as your supporting participants. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was a focus of what PGPs are and the focus areas of the grants. And we're going to talk and go into detail now a little bit more about the actual grant information. So next slide, please. So here's our timeline. You'll see that the grant applications are due Wednesday, August 19th. Applicants will be notified September 4th of the status. The grant period will actually run from September 29th of this year through May 15th, 2021. We will be having a virtual grant kickoff meeting on Tuesday, September 29th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And all grant coordinators and facilitators will be required to attend this grant kickoff. And so any costs for release time for coordinators or facilitators and for substitute time must be charged to the grant out of your grant budget. So as you're completing a budget, which I'll talk about in a minute, you'll be wanting to be sure to include those. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so we talked a lot about the learning communities and how you need to have at least 20 educators within those communities. You need to have at least a minimum of 3 in-person meetings. Right now, virtual is counting as an in-person meeting. If schools are back in session and things like that and you're able to meet together, then you would be meeting in person. Those meeting structures are locally determined by you, but one possibility is at the first meeting you could cover self-assessments and goal setting and have your participants complete that piece of the PGP. In the second meeting, you could talk about action plan and working on the implementation of that. And then in the third meeting, the educators could reflect and review one another's PGPs. We did run a similar grant last year, and we heard from many of the organizations who said they wished they had put in a 4th meeting in there at the very beginning because it took a while to explain the PGP process, the actual PGP form, and looking at all the standards. That took quite a bit of time. So just kind of a tip from previous grantees that you may want to actually schedule 4 meetings and spend that first one as just a real introduction to the whole process. And again, this is a suggestion. You can determine how your meetings are set up. PESB staff will also do at least 1 site visit during the grant period. And we would like that to be on a day that you have your learning community meeting so we can meet your participants and kind of hear what's going on there. So again, if this may be a virtual site visit or a visit in person, just depending on what the restrictions and regulations are in the state at that time. So, next slide. There also will be some grant reporting requirements at the end of the grant period. By the last day of the grant, which is May 15th, we are going to ask grantees to submit at least 1 resource that your organization developed to support participants in completing their PGPs in learning communities. So for example, last year we had a grantee who created a needs assessment, which is part of that PGP process for paraeducators, because that had not been created. And so they actually submitted that resource to us. Could be resources like a crosswalk between the cell standards and the actual row standards, or anything else that helps your participants in completing this PGP process. Grantees will also be asked to administer a pre and post survey to their participants. So this is actually a survey that PESB will develop. Our questions will focus on the PGP process, on the learning community and the PGP focus area, and on the career goals. Again, the reason for that is because we are kind of piloting and looking at any data of relating this professional learning to educator retention. And so if you do receive this grant during the kickoff, we will share more information with you about that and share the link about that. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a couple more requirements. Grant leaders will also respond to an end of grant questionnaire. This will be what we call the final report. Again, this will be developed by PESB, and the questions will focus on successes and challenges during your grant period and with what your activities, as well as any learning related to the goals of each grant focused area. And in the grant information packet that's linked here, if you go to page 10, you'll actually see some of the sample questions that may be used on that questionnaire. And then finally, grant leaders will be asked to submit participant PGPs with all identifying information removed. PGPs that meet expectations, do not meet expectations, and any feedback that you have will all be welcome when you submit this. And again, we will use some of these sample PGPs as samples on our website for educators. So right now, outside of this grant, educators just complete PGPs on their own, usually. And so we like to provide a lot of resources for them. And so these samples will be very helpful. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about the grant scoring. Only complete applications planning for at least the minimum number of participants, which is 20, will be required. And so that 20 could be made up of, doesn't have to be just teachers, could be teachers, could be paraeducators, it could be other certificated educators in your building. You don't have to limit this to just teachers or paras. We have, in the past, we had a organization who actually included all of the counselors in the district in their grant. So it can be any educators in that count of 20. Applications will all be scored out of 50 points. And then up to 10 additional priority points will be given to applications that address those priority areas that we discussed at the very first of the grant. Again, here is the link to the scoring rubric that will be used by reviewers. So you'll be able to see this as you're developing your grant application as well. Next slide, please. So on the application, we actually have the exact questions from the application here for you. I'm not going to read them all. I'll just kind of highlight each one of them. But we do want you to be aware of the questions. And one of the reasons for that is, as you see the link here, the application is actually an online application form. So you'll want to read through all of these questions, look through the standards, and kind of develop your answers before going in and completing the application form. So again, these are the exact questions that are in that form. The first question here talks about your learning community design and structure and how it will promote educator retention. And that is worth 10 points. The next question talks about your area of focus. Ask you the reason that you chose this and how you'll build it on a structure already in place. And that's worth 5 points. Next slide, please. The next question here talks about how you'll identify, engage a minimum of 20 participants for your program. That is worth 5 points. Also, how you'll include equity considerations when you're identifying and engaging your participants. That's worth another 5 points. And then we also will ask you how you will describe your culturally sustaining practices. That will be a part of the grant structure, and how you'll support your participants with these practices. And that's another 5 points there. Next slide. All right. The next question here really talks about your program structure, how it's going to allow for the stages of professional growth and completing the PGP. We'll ask you for your minimum of 3 in-person meetings and your anticipated meeting dates, how and when you'll support your educators during the PGP process, and how they'll review and reflect on their learning. So that'll be 5 points. And you'll also see another question here, which will ask you to, excuse me, describe the support structures that you'll have in place for your participants and your facilitators and your grant coordinator. Excuse me, including compensation, time, or other support provided. And next slide, please. Last couple of questions here. The top question here asks you to go ahead and identify your grant coordinator and your at least minimum of 2 PLC facilitators. If you do not have them identified, describe how you plan to identify these individuals. And when you also ask you to identify them, also provide some information about their background and what makes them qualified. And then the last question actually on the grant that will be scored is for you to describe the training that your facilitators have already completed or that you'll provide for them. So this could include National Board Facilitator Training, Best Mentor Training, working as a cooperating teacher, and a couple of other examples here. So that question will be worth 5 points. In addition, each organization must submit a completed memorandum of agreement with the application. And so this will link to a MOA template that will ask you to fill out. And basically this MOA will be between your organization and PSB. And you will agree to assurances of the grant, the timeline that we've mentioned, all of these requirements for the grant. That's what the MOA will be. So you will need to, with your application, upload your completed and signed MOA with that, and there will be a link. You'll want to download the MOA from here, save it on your computer, complete it, and then when you're completing the application online, just upload that. Next, please, next slide. The other thing that's going to be required in this grant application is that you upload an itemized budget. And in that budget, you must include compensation and cost for release time if needed for participants and the grant coordinator and the facilitators. You'll also include, that could include any cost for the grant kickoff meeting. Also at the end of the grant, we'll be having a virtual grant showcase where coordinators and facilitators will be required to attend. And so you'll want to be sure to include any compensation and release time in your budget for that as well. Your budget will also need to include any grant-related efforts and programming, any other related grant costs, and any compensation for participants, grant coordinator, and PLC facilitators for participating and involvement in this grant. And again, that could include stipends, whatever you choose to use as compensation. So your grant application actually won't even be able to submit your application without uploading the MOA and then the budget. We do not have a budget template. You can just, go onto an Excel sheet or however you would like to create that budget to upload that. All right, next question, or next slide, I'm sorry. So really that was our overview of the grant, and we'll take some time now to answer any questions that we see in the Q&A box. So as you're thinking of them, please go ahead and put them in here. And actually, it looks like these were already answered in writing. So I believe if you go into the Q&A box, you can see the questions. I'll just review them. Districts, are districts permitted to apply for more than one grant? If they are grants with different focus areas, then yes, you can. By 20 educators, do we mean a combination of certificated teachers and educators? Yes, combination of teachers, ESCs, administrators, or paraeducators. And many of your paraeducators will not be certificated at this point, which is perfectly fine, because that is another priority of the grant, is including these paras. How many grants do you anticipate funding? Approximately 15 to 18 grants, so we do have quite a few available. Are there exemplar budgets or suggested budget formatting? We do not have a template, but I can certainly send out kind of the format that some of the grantees used last year. So I'll be happy to send kind of just an exemplary template that you could use out when I send out the grant application and the link to these slides. So we'll be happy to do that. Are there, let's see, it looks like there may be another question here. Oh, Maren, I'm sorry, put in there. Great, thank you, Maren. She shared a lot about the budget here and what should be included in the budget. Right. And to see if there's any other questions. Let's see, make sure I don't miss any. What are the grant allocations that we would be building a budget around? So it is a $15,000 total grant budget, and you can determine how you would like to allocate those funds. So that's what you will actually be building your budget around, just knowing that 15,000 is the maximum there. Is it okay to have teachers as participants across multiple districts? Yes. In fact, we had a group last year. I think the WEA even did a group, and they had participants from all over the state in there, so you can certainly do that. Are there guidelines for facilitator and participant stipends? You'll just want to design the support, your local and our grant goals. So beyond that, there's really no other guidelines. It really is up to you. Just make sure that you're able to have that $15,000 kind of stretch. I know last year we had a concern with people not compensating coordinators or facilitators enough. So I mean, be sure that, you know, these are current educators and this is their time that they're putting in outside of their position. So just be sure, you know, that you are providing support to coordinators and facilitators as well as your participants. Curious about the in-person requirements. If we aim to support teachers from a range of districts, can we hold meetings virtually? Yes, actually. Last year, and Lauren, chime in here if you have something different, actually, you may have answered. Yeah, synchronous online learning will work for the in-person requirement. Great, thank you. Lots of really good questions. I'm glad to hear these. Yeah, so great. The next one was just upon in-person or synchronous online learning, depending on local requirements. But what we do ask, and we found one thing that was very helpful, depending on, no matter what the size of your PLC is, if you do one large one with 20 or some smaller ones, we really found that, according to the grants last year, the collaboration between educators really was extremely important in helping them through the whole PGP process. Most of the participants, in fact, from our report from this last grant we just did, 74% of the participants, when given a choice, said that they would really prefer to do their PGPs in grant communities. So please be sure, whether you're providing smaller communities or larger, be sure that you're allowing your participants time to collaborate with each other. So, all right, I don't see any other questions. I'm going to give everyone another minute or two if there's any other questions to go ahead and type in the Q&A box. So as I'm giving a minute for anyone else, we are just really excited that you joined us, and we had quite a few participants today and others who registered who weren't able to be here. As you noticed, we are recording this as Maren said, it'll be another probably a week or two by the time it actually gets posted, just because of the holiday and things like that. And we'll have this recording captioned, and then we will let you know when that is posted as well. Looks like there is another. Great, thank you everyone for participating. And Megan, if you could move to the next slide then, please. Our last slide. Just wanted to share with you that PESB is on Twitter. We have a Facebook page as well as newsletters. So I would really encourage you to sign up for any or all of these that you're interested in. If you sign up for a newsletter, you will get all the new announcements that goes out about our grants and pilot programs, as well as things that were decided by the board. So yeah, we are really excited to work with you. In the meantime, as you're working on this, if you have any questions, the very first slide of this slide deck, which I'll send out to you this afternoon, does have all of our emails on here. So please feel free to just shoot us any questions you have as you're going through. I believe I don't see anything else here. So again, just thank you all so much. We're really excited to get your applications and to support you as you support our educators and our students in the field. So thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing from you.